These muscle cars showed off like kings of the road, turning heads wherever they went. But once people drove them, the truth came out. They were all looks and no muscle. Number 15, 1975 AMC Pacer. Back in the day, the 1975 AMC Pacer looked like something from the future. Its shape was round, wide, and different from anything else on the road. Some people even thought it would become the next big thing. But now, many years later, it's clear why this car didn't make it to the top. First, let's talk about its power or lack of it. The Pacer came with two engine choices, both inline 6 cylinders. One was 232 cubic inches, and the other was 258 cubic inches. But sadly, neither gave the car any real power. It took the Pacer a full 20 seconds just to finish a quarter-mile run. Even worse, it only reached 65 miles per hour at that time. That's a far cry from what people expect in a true muscle car. Next up is the way it drove. The Pacer had a high center of gravity, which made it tricky to handle, especially during sharp turns. It was known for understeering, which means it didn't turn as quickly as the driver wanted. The steering system was supposed to help, using rack and pinion steering, but it felt numb and overly damp, taking away the fun and control drivers usually enjoy. And at 3,432 pounds, the Pacer was simply too heavy to move with any real excitement. Even its ride, which aimed for comfort, didn't bring anything special. It wasn't as soft and floaty as bigger cars, but it still felt too basic and boring for a car trying to be something more. Drivers were left wishing for something livelier. Then there were the brakes. Stopping the car from 70 miles per hour took about 205 feet. That's a long way. The rear wheels locked up too easily, thanks to too much brake force going to the back. That made the brakes feel weak and untrustworthy when it really mattered. Number 14, 1967 Dodge Cornet 500. The 1967 Dodge Cornet 500 might once have turned a few heads, but now it's a perfect example of a car that time has passed by. First off, the shape of this car is plain and boxy. In the 1960s, that square look was common, but now the body just looks bulky and out of place. It lacks any smooth curves or stylish style. There's nothing bold or exciting about how it appears. It's more of a big old block on wheels than a car that turns heads. And speaking of size, this car is huge, but not in a good way. The Cornet 500 takes up way too much space. Parking it is a pain, and trying to move it through traffic or make sharp turns is even worse. Its large size and heavy build make it feel clumsy on the road. Quick lane changes or tight corners? Forget about it. Even though it was once seen as a fancy model, the Cornet 500 really doesn't offer much in terms of comfort or features. Things like power windows or adjustable seats, which we now see as normal, just don't exist in this car. Airbags? Not here. The cabin is plain and the dashboard is stuck in the past. All you get are a few old-style gauges that only show basic numbers. No luxury, no smart touches, and definitely no fun tech. Then there's the problem with fuel. This car was built in a time when no one cared about saving gas. Its big engine may have been strong, but it drinks fuel fast. Driving long distances becomes expensive. Today's drivers want cars that go far on less, and this car simply cannot keep up. Riding in it isn't much better. The suspension is stiff, so every bump feels worse. It doesn't glide like modern cars. The brakes are slow to react, which can be risky if you need to stop fast. That makes driving less safe and less fun. To top it all off, this car just isn't reliable anymore. It's old and parts wear out. Fixing it costs a lot, and finding parts can be tough since many aren't made anymore. Number 13, 1966 Dodge Monaco. The 1966 Dodge Monaco ended up fading, literally and in every other way. At first glance, it might seem like a solid, full-size car, but a closer look reveals why this one was left behind. To start, the paint on the Monaco is a major problem. It chips way too easily, and the colors fade fast. This makes the car look old and tired, even when it's been cared for. The body wears down quickly, giving the feeling that the car has gone through years of rough roads, even when it hasn't. Step into the car, and things don't get much better. The paint codes for the cabin area are tricky. You need special compounds just to get the color right. That makes any repair or restoration a real headache. And even then, the color can come out looking patchy and uneven. The materials used for the trim and other parts also wear out quickly. Over time, the whole space starts to feel rough, dull, and far from comfortable. The Monaco came in different shapes, sedan, coupe, and more, but none of them truly grabbed attention. The four-door versions in particular felt way too big and clunky. They were hard to steer and not fun to move around. Even the coupe and hardtop models missed the mark when it came to style and sportiness. Well, the 1966 Dodge Monaco had too many flaws to earn a lasting place in car lovers' hearts. Number 12, 1965 Plymouth Barracuda. Next up, the 1965 Plymouth Barracuda is remembered for missing the mark. It was supposed to be Plymouth's answer to the pony car race, but instead of leading the pack, it tripped over its own feet. The first problem was how it looked. Plymouth took their plain old Valiant and added a giant curved back window. That was their big idea. It was not a hatchback, so the storage space in the back was awkward. The glass made it look strange, not sporty. It did not have the cool style of the Mustang or the stylish shape of the Corvair. Things did not get better under the hood. The base version came with a 6-cylinder engine that felt very weak. The best engine available was a 273 cubic inch V8 with 180 horsepower. That still wasn't enough to impress anyone. The Ford Mustang had an engine with 271 horsepower. It could leave the Barracuda far behind on the road. The Barracuda took almost 13 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. That is way too slow for a car meant to be fun and fast. The way it drove was another letdown. It felt more like a cheap family car than a pony car. The suspension made every little bump feel big, the steering was not sharp, and the brakes were not strong. Even with the V8 engine, the car did not sound exciting or feel thrilling. If you wanted to enjoy the ride, you were better off with a Mustang or even a Corvair Spider with its turbocharged engine. The sales numbers told the full story. The Barracuda sold about 65,000 units in its first full year. The Mustang, over 400,000. That showed exactly what the people wanted, and it was not the Barracuda. Even the Corvair, which had problems of its own, sold better. Some tried to say the Barracuda was practical because of its cargo space, but nobody buys a pony car for carrying stuff. To be fair, Plymouth improved the Barracuda later, especially with the Coupe models. But in 1965, it just was not good enough. Number 11, 1964 Mercury Cyclone. Back in the year 1964, Mercury thought they had built a winner. They rolled out a car called the Cyclone. The Mercury Cyclone was one of those cars that the world quietly forgot, and for very good reasons. Mercury wanted the Cyclone to be fast, sporty, and strong, but under all the talk was a car that just could not keep up. They gave it a 289 cubic inch V8 engine. Sounds impressive, right? But it only made 271 horsepower. That might sound like a lot, but for a muscle car it was weak, especially when other cars of the time were going way beyond that. And if you wanted the most speed from the Cyclone, you had to use a 4-speed manual transmission that was anything but smooth. Driving it felt more like work than fun. The way it was built didn't help either. Mercury put the Cyclone on a small, compact base. That might sound smart, but it made the car feel tight, bumpy, and light in a bad way. It did not give drivers the strong, heavy muscle car feel they wanted. The small wheels and narrow shape made handling a nightmare. One bump in the road could shake your whole body. Try to take a fast turn, you would hope the car didn't slide off the road. The look of the car also missed the mark. Mercury tried to give the Cyclone a race-ready style, but it ended up looking like a copy of better cars. The dual scoop fiberglass hood looked cool, but it did not do much at all. Chrome trim was added everywhere, but it only made the car heavier. Mercury stuck racing flags and Cyclone signs on the sides, hoping people would believe this car was something special. But it wasn't. Even the seating space was no good. The white vinyl material looked sharp for a little while, but it was super hard to keep clean. The controls and meters were basic and plain. Mercury bragged about a rare tachometer placed on the dashboard, but it didn't make the car go any faster. And the push-button AM radio, it was nearly useless. And let's not forget fuel use. The Cyclone was terrible when it came to gas mileage. You filled the tank often, and for what? A car that felt more like a mistake than a muscle car. Number 10, 1969 Ford Torino Talladega. The 1969 Ford Torino Talladega came to real street driving. It just did not deliver. Ford built it to qualify for NASCAR rules, not to make people smile on regular roads. Now let's talk about the most exciting part of any muscle car, the engine. The racing version of this car had the powerful Boss 429 cubic inch V8, but regular folks who bought it from the dealership got something else. The 428 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8. That engine made 335 horsepower, which sounds strong, but here's the problem. It came with a column shift automatic transmission. No manual option at all. That's a big letdown for a car that looks like it belongs on a speedway. The shape of the car was also a bit strange. Ford changed the front to help it move through the air better, but it ended up looking long and odd from certain angles. Even more strange, the front bumper was not made for this car at all. It was a modified rear bumper from another Ford model. It looked out of place and made the front look unfinished. The whole car sat lower than the regular Ford Torino, which helped on the racetrack, but on normal roads it made the ride feel rough and stiff. Now think about the space where you sit. Ford kept it simple, too simple. They thought a race-themed car did not need nice features, so it ended up with a very plain setup. It had a basic bench seat, a boring dashboard, and no real touches that made it feel special. It was not stylish, not sporty, just plain and empty. Even though it could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.5 seconds, there was a catch. The race car version could reach 190 miles per hour. The street version, only about 130 miles per hour. That is still quick, but far less than what the body promised. And Ford did not build many. Depending on who you ask, they made between 750 and 754 cars. Not because they were popular, but because Ford needed just enough to meet the race rules. Number 9, 1966, Chevrolet Chevelle SS 396. Back in the late 1960s, young drivers had one big dream, the Chevrolet SS 396. It had a bold look, a strong name, and a big engine under the hood. But once people started driving it, the truth became clear. The SS 396 had problems, big ones, and that is why it was left behind. Start with the engine. The base version came with 325 horsepower. That might sound exciting, but not when the car was this heavy. It had a hard time keeping up with lighter muscle cars like the Pontiac GTO. If you really wanted it to feel powerful, you had to pay more for a better engine. So it was not the great deal people thought it was. Then came the handling. The SS 396 could go fast in a straight line, but the moment you tried to turn, things got risky. The steering felt loose and soft, and the suspension was not built for sharp moves. At higher speeds or on wet roads, this car could slide or spin out if you were not very careful. It just was not made for smooth control. Fuel use was another big issue. The SS 396 used up gasoline like it was free. Back in the day, fuel was cheap, so no one cared. But today, running this car would cost you a fortune in fuel. It burned more gas than most people could handle now. Even the design caused trouble. Sure, it looked strong with its long hood and wide shape, but that made parking a real pain. Trying to fit it into a small space was not fun, and where the driver sat was no better. The seats were not very comfortable, and everything else was plain. The dashboard had no exciting features. It felt like style was more important than comfort. Number 8, 1978 Dodge Magnum XE. The 1978 Dodge Magnum XE looked like a powerful classic ready to dominate. But the truth? It was more like a tired old lion with a fake mane. To begin with, the Magnum XE had a body that was just too big and heavy. It stretched over 17 feet in length and more than 6 feet in width. That made it feel clumsy and hard to control, especially in tight spots. And under the hood, nothing exciting. The smallest engine was a 318 cubic inch V8 with only 140 horsepower. That made it feel slow and sleepy on the road. Even the most powerful version didn't do much better. It came with a 400 cubic inch V8 engine, but still only gave 190 horsepower. That's weak for a car that looked like a race-ready machine. In truth, it was just the old Dodge Charger with a new front end. It had hidden headlights, shiny chrome, and plastic trim to seem sporty, but that was just makeup on an old face. The car also had a fake GT option. It gave you wider tires, a tighter steering feel, and fake metal trim on the dashboard. But guess what? No extra power at all. It only pretended to be fast. Then there was the way it handled, like a boat rocking on waves. Built on an old B-body platform, it had a soft suspension that made it bounce on corners. Even with optional sway bars, it couldn't stay steady. It also tried to act rich with shiny fake wood, soft carpet, and bright roof colors like silver and red. The T-bar roof panels looked fun, but were weak and often leaked during rain. Worst of all was the lean burn system. This new fuel-saving tech often failed and confused mechanics, making the car hard to start. Number 7, 1978 AMC Concord. The 1978 AMC Concord looked like it might be something special. It had shiny chrome details, a long hood, and a short deck, things that might remind you of a sporty ride. But once you looked a little closer, the truth came out. This car just didn't have what it takes to be called a muscle car. Let's begin with how it looked. Sure, it had clean lines, but the side view made it look more like a regular family car than anything fast or fierce. The shape wasn't bold or exciting. It lacked the aggressive feel that true muscle cars proudly show off. Moving to the cabin area, the Concord tried to offer a touch of luxury. It had black vinyl seats and a basic dashboard setup. You'd find a simple AM/FM radio and air conditioning controls. That might sound okay, but it wasn't anything special. The seats were fine for normal driving, but didn't give the support you need when the road gets twisty or the speed picks up. The whole area looked neat, but it didn't feel thrilling or fun. It missed that exciting spark. Speaking of power, the Concord came with a 258 cubic inch inline-six engine. That might sound like muscle, but paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission, it just didn't move with any punch. Acceleration was slow and boring. People who love muscle cars expect speed and power, but the Concord couldn't deliver even a little bit of that excitement. Handling was no better. The Concord felt heavy and didn't like to be pushed. Its suspension setup, coil springs in the front and leaf springs in the back, was plain and didn't help the car feel sharp or agile. Even with power disc brakes in the front, it still drove like a clunky, unresponsive machine. However, with weak power, dull handling, and no real thrill, it's no surprise this one was left in the past, exactly where it belongs. Number 6, 1973 Dodge Charger Base. The 1973 Dodge Charger Base wore the clothes of a muscle car, but once you got to know it, the power just wasn't there. At first look, it seemed bold. The wide body and big front end made it appear fast, but under the hood, things were very different. The base model came with a small slant-six engine that made only 105 brake horsepower. Even if you upgraded to a V8 engine, you only got 150 brake horsepower. For a car that looked tough, it was really quite weak. The body shape stayed mostly the same from earlier years. Dodge only changed the grille a little to meet new bumper safety rules. The front bumper had to handle soft crashes at 5 miles per hour, and the back bumper at 2.5 miles per hour. So rubber blocks were added, but these only made the car heavier without adding any real help or protection. More small letdowns followed. The 4 headlights were no longer hidden, which made the front look cheaper than before. The back had tail lights with 22 tiny bulbs, but that was just a flashy trick with no real purpose. Even the roof shape was changed just for style, not for speed or strength. Now let's talk about what it offered. You could choose power steering, a sunroof, fancy radios, and even an 8-track music player. There were power brakes and windows too. But all of these added more weight. None of them gave it a better speed. It was full of extras, but lacked real energy. Even the rally package, which added sway bars and a bulged hood, could not save it. The bigger, stronger engines cost more and were rare. Most people ended up with the weaker versions. And yes, there were more than 20 color choices, but no color could hide the truth. This Charger only looked fast. In reality, it was just a slow car pretending to be something more. That's why it's best left in the past. Number 5, 1974 Ford Mustang II Mach 1. The 1974 Ford Mustang II Mach 1 was meant to carry on the Mustang legend, but instead it left drivers scratching their heads. What should have been a strong and exciting muscle car turned into something slow, small, and forgettable. From the very beginning, things went wrong. The original Mustang was known for its strong V8 engines and thrilling speed, but the Mustang II was built on the same setup as the tiny Ford Pinto. That made it smaller, weaker, and more like a basic economy car than a real muscle machine. The engine choices did not help at all. The basic version came with a weak 4-cylinder engine that did not belong in any car with a Mustang badge. The Mach 1 version came with a V6 engine as standard, not very powerful for something sold as sporty. There was a V8 available, but thanks to strict emission rules, it only made 105 horsepower. That was far from the strong engines that made the Mustang famous, and the weight made it worse. Even though it was smaller than the first Mustang, the Mustang II actually weighed more. That made it feel slow and heavy. Drivers who expected a fast and fun ride got stuck with a sluggish ride that did not feel like a Mustang at all. The look of the car did not save it either. The Mustang II Mach 1 tried to look bold, but it missed the mark. Its boxy shape and strange size gave it odd proportions. Instead of the wide and powerful look of classic Mustangs, it looked more like a Ford Pinto with extra plastic pieces. Where people sat was not much better. The parts felt cheap with too much plastic and fake wood. The seats were not comfortable, and nothing really felt high quality. It was clear that Ford had cut corners wherever they could. But the biggest problem? This car almost ruined what the Mustang name stood for. The original Mustang meant power, speed, and fun. The 1974 Mustang II Mach 1 felt more like a slow commuter car with sporty stickers. It may have sold well at first, but it quickly became known as one of the weakest Mustangs ever built. It had no muscle, no charm, and no reason to be remembered. Number 4, 1994, Pontiac Firebird V6. In the year 1994, Pontiac rolled out a car, the Firebird V6. With its sharp edges and wide stance, it promised to bring back muscle car excitement. But the biggest problem started right under the hood. Pontiac gave this version a 207 cubic inch V6 engine that made only 160 horsepower. That might sound decent, but for a car shaped like a rocket, it barely moved with strength. Even though it had sequential fuel injection, the engine felt slow and dull. Driving it felt more like a chore than an adventure. Anyone hoping for muscle car thrills was left disappointed. The transmission did not help either. The base version came with a 5-speed manual gearbox. While that might sound fun, the gear changes were rough and clunky. There was also an optional 4-speed automatic, but it was reused from older models and felt lazy. Acceleration was weak, and reaching 60 miles per hour took far too long. Some family cars at the time were quicker and smoother. Furthermore, the car's shape looked stylish, but the weight held it back. Even with rear-wheel drive and independent front and rear suspension, the Firebird did not handle like a sports car. It felt heavy and slow when turning corners. The power loss and sluggish gear shifting made it feel like dragging something instead of racing forward. Where you sat did not impress either. The layout had a strange, rounded design that was more confusing than cool. The buttons and switches were packed into the center area, and some were hard to reach while driving. The parts used felt low in quality. The plastic squeaked when hitting bumps, and the cloth seats wore out fast. Leather was only offered in higher trims, not in this V6 version. However, safety was only halfway there. Yes, it came with dual airbags and anti-lock brakes, which sounded nice at the time, but many other cars already had better safety systems. The Firebird V6 did not include traction control, which made driving in bad weather risky, especially for those not used to handling a powerful-looking rear-wheel drive car. Number 3, 1999 Mercury Cougar. In the late 1990s, the Mercury Cougar returned with a brand new look. When the 1999 model first appeared in magazines, people got excited. It had sharp lines, a modern shape, and it turned heads wherever it went. Younger drivers especially thought it looked fresh and different. But after the excitement faded and people started driving it every day, the real story came out. Looks alone were not enough to save it. One of the first big problems was the place where drivers sat. From the very beginning, people complained about the seats. Even after just a few hundred miles, it was clear they were uncomfortable. No matter how much the seat was adjusted, it never felt quite right. The lumbar support stuck out too far, even on the lowest setting, and the seat bottom felt sunken in the middle. On long trips, it became painful. Some even joked they would rather walk than ride in the Cougar for more than an hour. That meant fewer road trips and more time parked. Not only this, but trouble under the hood. The Cougar came with a 153 cubic inch V6 engine. It looked fine on paper, but it had strange behavior. When stopped at a red light, the engine would keep revving between 2,000 and 3,000 revolutions per minute before calming down. It made drivers worry that something was wrong even when the car was running normally. Other cars with similar engines ran smoother, so this one stood out in the wrong way. Plus, controls were also frustrating. The radio knob worked poorly. You had to keep turning it many times just to raise or lower the volume. It felt slow and unresponsive. The side mirrors were small and had a strange shape. They looked fancy, but it was hard to see clearly behind the car. For something that was supposed to feel sporty, this design made driving more difficult and even unsafe. Then there were mechanical troubles. One day, the car just refused to start because of a wiring issue. It was repaired for free, but the surprise made owners nervous about getting stranded again. On top of that, the car needed frequent service. The maintenance bills kept stacking up. It ended up costing more than other cars from the same company, even though it did not offer better speed, comfort, or reliability. The 1999 Mercury Cougar's poor seats, odd engine behavior, hard-to-use features, and constant repairs made it a car left in the past for a reason. Number 2, 1976 Chevrolet Camaro Rally Sport. Back in the mid-1970s, Chevrolet brought out a car that wore a famous badge and had sporty stripes, the Camaro Rally Sport. But the moment the wheels hit the pavement, the truth came out. Under the hood, things were disappointing. The standard engine was a 305 cubic inch V8 that made only 140 horsepower. For a car that looked aggressive, this power was far too low. Even if buyers paid more for the bigger 350 cubic inch V8, they only got 165 horsepower. It simply was not enough to keep up with the older Camaros from the late 1960s or early 1970s. In addition, the Camaro also became heavier over the years due to added safety and emissions parts. That extra weight made the car feel slow and lazy. The small amount of power had to work hard just to keep it moving. It was a frustrating ride for anyone expecting muscle car thrills. Also, build quality was another big issue. This was not a good time for American cars, and it showed. The paint often faded or chipped, and rust showed up fast, especially near the wheel areas and lower panels. Many owners found themselves paying for repairs sooner than expected. Where people sat, the story did not get any better. The parts felt cheap, with lots of plastic and fake trim. The dashboard cracked easily in the sun, and the seats were not made for comfort. Things rattled, panels were loose, and the overall feel was rushed and low quality. Beyond this, fuel use was poor too. Even with low horsepower, the Camaro used up fuel quickly. During the gas crisis of the 1970s, this made it a tough car to keep on the road without emptying your wallet. Driving it was no joy either. The steering felt weak and loose, and the outdated suspension made the ride rough. Even the brakes were not up to the job, using disc brakes in the front, but drum brakes in the back, which is not ideal for a heavy car. To make it worse, details about the car were often wrong. Horsepower numbers and mileage were listed incorrectly on decals, making it hard to know what you were really buying. Number 1, 1990 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe. Finally, in the year 1990, Ford released the Thunderbird Super Coupe with big promises and bold looks. It had a wide body, a strong stance, and a supercharged engine under the hood. But once the excitement wore off, drivers quickly realized that this bird had more weight than wings and not enough power to fly. Speaking of power, the engine was a 207 cubic inch V6 with an Eaton M90 supercharger pushing out around 12 pounds per square inch of boost. That gave the car 210 horsepower and 315 pound-feet of torque. While that sounded decent, it was still less than the 302 cubic inch V8 in the Mustang. In addition, the torque was strong and came early, with peak numbers showing up at just 3,000 revolutions per minute. But the engine ran out of steam quickly, with peak power at only 4,000 revolutions per minute. After that, the engine felt flat. It was not made to rev high, so trying to push it hard did not bring any extra fun. Even though the torque curve was wide and full, with over 250 pound-feet between 2,300 and 3,400 revolutions per minute, the car still felt heavy. The Thunderbird had solid ride comfort and braking, but it was not sharp when turning. On tight corners, it felt more like steering a big boat than driving a sports car. The weight worked against it every time someone tried to drive with energy. The space for passengers was more comfortable than in some muscle cars, but it lacked excitement. The design did not feel sporty. The seats were just average, and the overall look did not match the car's powerful name. Well, some drivers tried to improve things with modifications. They swapped the factory flat panel air filter for a high-flow K and N filter. That brought power up from 192 horsepower to 200 and torque from 265 to 287 pound-feet. A smaller blower pulley added 1.5 pounds of boost and brought torque to over 300 pound-feet between 2,100 and 3,200 revolutions per minute. They also added a new 2.8-inch mass airflow sensor and cone filter. Power reached 211 horsepower and 315 pound-feet of torque. A 5% overdrive idler pulley gave it more boost, raising torque even more. Finally, a Flowmaster aftercat exhaust and resonator brought peak power to 230 horsepower and torque to 332 pound-feet. Even after all these upgrades, the Thunderbird still never reached the 300 horsepower mark. The numbers improved, but the heavy feel and early power drop-off never went away. Thanks for watching. Let us know which car surprised you the most in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more muscle car stories.